Yeah. So tonight is going to be a little bit different. The best way I could describe tonight is more so a conversation than me teaching to you guys. So up here I have with me Sara Claudia Tillman. Y'all welcome Sara Claudia to the 78.
Thank you.
So she actually spoke at an event here at City Station, and I was working the sound booth that day, and I was talking to her manager, her agent. I guess that's how I.
That sounds so official when you
Yeah,
say it
so
like that.
official.
Yeah.
I mean, she's been all over the world. She speaks all over the place. So basically, what I'm going to do is me and Sara Claudia are going to pretend there's nobody else in the room, and we're going to talk about bearing fruit, being known by fruit. So Sara Claudia, just to get us started, could you share your story with us?
Yes. So my name's Sara Claudia. I am 25 years old, and I'm currently a senior at University of West Georgia. I'll graduate with my bachelor's degree in psychology in December. I'm super excited. I feel like I've been in college forever, so I'm ready to be done. But I grew up here in Carrollton. I actually grew up in Bowden, but I went to school in Carrollton. Uh,
Oh, yeah, Brian, I don't think you want to start the school competition in here. Okay.
Anyways, I'm far enough removed from that. It's been a while. It's been a while since high school.
Brian's an adult, so.
Okay, that's okay. I like the enthusiasm. But I grew up the youngest of three, so anybody here with older siblings know that the babies of the family are kind of obligated to be a little stubborn, a little headstrong, because we have to stand up for ourselves, So I grew up really independent. I was always kind of doing my own thing, and I started riding horses when I was about 5, and I kind of took to that immediately. My mom signed me up for a week-long horse camp, and I don't think she realized that this week-long commitment would be a lifelong commitment because I immediately started begging for lessons and then started begging to be able to show and then started begging for my own pony. So kind of spiraled out of control from there, and I kept riding through elementary school, through junior high, and through high school. And I was also in the marching band, so I was a bit of a band nerd, but that's okay. So when I got to my senior year of high school, I made it onto the Berry College equestrian team through an early tryout process. And so I was super excited to graduate and to head off to Rome and start my college career. So I graduated high school in 2012, which seems like a long time ago. And I packed up and headed to Rome, and my parents were super nerdy. They decorated our Suburban and wrote Berry Bound in the blue paint and bought me a little Viking hat I had to wear everywhere. So I was that girl on the first day. So the 3 years that I spent at Berry were probably some of the best of my life. I made a lot of friends on and off the equestrian team. I enjoyed my classes. I probably didn't study as much as I should have, but I had fun and I did pretty good. And I was very successful on the equestrian team. I placed second in the nation my freshman year and then third in the nation my sophomore year. And when my junior year rolled around, um, I'm still kind of bitter about what happened because I didn't make it to nationals that year, but I was very determined to ride all summer and practice a lot and work really hard so that my senior year I could hopefully make it to nationals and end my college career, on a really good note. So before I could start all these plans, I had one little thing to take care of first. So after finishing up my finals, my junior year, I headed home back to Carrollton, and on May 5th of 2015, I went in to the hospital to have my tonsils taken out. And after the surgery, I was discharged that afternoon, went back to my parents' house, and my mom actually decided to sleep with me that night. I was 20 years old at the time, so, it was kind of unusual, but she just had a mother's intuition, I guess. So she slept with me that night to keep an eye on me, and about 3 o'clock in the morning, she woke up, and she decided she would wake me up and check on me and give me some water to coat my throat and just make sure everything was all good. But when she tried to wake me up, she discovered me completely non-responsive and barely breathing. So she called my dad, who was downstairs, and he rushed up there, and they called an ambulance. And my parents live out on Indian Creek Road in Bowden, way out in the middle of nowhere. So anytime you call an ambulance, you'll see the lights on the road going past our house, and they can never find us. So it took a little while for them to get there, but they finally got there. And my dad was shaking me to keep me breathing, and they were freaking out. So they got me back to the emergency room, and I was immediately intubated and put on a ventilator, which was breathing for me. And then the waiting just began. My family didn't know if I was going to wake up. They didn't know what I was going to be like if I did wake up, if I would be able to walk or talk or really do anything for myself. So the next day, when the breathing tube was taken out and I started breathing on my own, everybody kind of started celebrating a little bit. And as I began to regain consciousness and I began to talk a little bit, the celebration soon ended because I revealed, I think in one of the first like coherent sentences I said was to my dad, and he's actually an eye doctor, and I told him that I couldn't see anything and everything was completely black. So at that point, I was transferred to a different hospital where a lot more tests and scans and things were done. And they also found out at this point that in addition to completely losing sight in both of my eyes, I had also lost hearing in one of my ears. So here I was, 20 years old. I had had all these plans for my summer and for my senior year of college, and I now found myself laying in a hospital bed, not being able to see and barely being able to hear. And at this point, I had no idea what was going on. I was completely out of it. And I don't remember anything from the hospital, but I've heard stories, and it's comforting to know that beneath all that trauma and all the medication, I was still my independent, headstrong self, because there were a lot of stories of me trying to get up out of the hospital bed and just walk places by myself. When I was blind and hooked up to all these machines, I would just try to get up and get out of there. So I was still myself under all that medication and everything. But I mean, needless to say, we were going through, a lot of grief, a lot of loss, and a lot of just confusion at how this had happened so quickly, how our lives had all changed just literally in a second. So after 2 weeks in the hospital, I was sent home back to my parents' house. So once again, I found myself returning to my childhood home, but this time, instead of returning as a carefree college student who had her future all planned out, I was returning as somebody with a disability who had no idea how to move forward. So the next few weeks and months were spent with me really just laying on the couch most of the time. We were in just a total state of grief and devastation, and we had no idea what to do with this situation we had been handed. And I also felt really isolated from my friends. They were all at college starting the summer semester without me. I couldn't talk to them because I didn't know how to use my phone yet. I didn't know I could even use a phone yet. So I couldn't talk to any of my friends. I had a boyfriend back at school I couldn't talk to. So I just felt completely isolated. And I felt isolated from my family as well, because as much support they were giving me, I knew I was the only one actually dealing with the blindness, with the hearing loss. So as bad as that sounds, I just felt completely isolated from them. And so I started to, you know, look for comfort different places. I would eat for comfort, so I ate everything in sight, I like to say, no pun intended, but I would eat anything that was put in front of me, I would eat. So I started to gain a lot of weight, and that was hard. And then I started to lash out a lot because everything now for me was hard. Everything was frustrating, no matter how simple it was. If it was just getting the right amount of toothpaste on a toothbrush or getting dressed or finding things that I've dropped, everything was hard. Everything was frustrating. And I turned this frustration into anger at the people around me, mostly my mom, because she was there 24/7. So I spent a lot of time just being angry and sitting on the couch and crying. And that was my life for several weeks. And I started to realize, this is miserable. This isn't what I want to do. So the only thing I knew to do was to pray about it. So I started to pray first just for healing. I would say to God, I would say, let me just wake up and be able to see. And that's all I would say, because that's all I wanted at that point. I just wanted to be able to see. And I started to get more and more disappointed every day I woke up and couldn't see. So I started to pray for an answer. Why did this happen to me? How did this happen to me? Why did you let this happen to me? And then I started to get more and more frustrated when I wasn't being healed and when God wasn't giving me an answer. So as my prayers kind of became more, more constant, I started to talk to God more often. They began to shift even more, and my relationship with God, started to grow because I just felt like I was conversing with Him. Before, prayer had always been for me I felt like it should be a really formal thing. But in this situation, when I felt like I had nobody else who really understood what I was going through, I started to talk to God as more of a friend. And through this and through my relationship with Him strengthening, I started to realize, there's a reason I'm still here. There's a reason my mom woke up when she did and found me when she did. So I started to think, well, maybe there's a purpose that I can have through all this, no matter how hard it is. So I started to pray for a purpose, and through praying for this, I really began to feel strength. It was like as my relationship with God was strengthening, I was being strengthened as well. So I decided I wanted to go back to school. So I started learning all the things I needed to learn to go back to college. And so this involved learning how to use my white cane. So I had to learn how to get from my dorm room to all my classes. So I had to basically memorize all these different routes. I had to learn how to cross a street safely, which is really hard when you can't see and can't hear out of one ear. So that's something I'm still not 100% comfortable with, but maybe I'll get there one day. And I had to learn how to navigate indoor spaces, to get to my classes inside. So that took a few months. And at the same time, I had to learn Braille. So the raised dots that you see, on bathroom signs and in elevators, I had to learn how to read that. And I use it today all over my house. So I have my own house today, and I use it to label all of my appliances and my clothes and everything. So that took about a year and a half to learn. And then I had to learn how to use technology. So I have an iPhone, believe it or not, and I can use it pretty much in the same way you can. It's got a screen reader built into it, so it basically reads the screen to me. But I had to learn different finger gestures in order to work it. So, like, I'll use 3 fingers to swipe, and I'll double tap to open an app or click on a link. So, with that, I can read text, I can text people back, I can scroll Facebook, read emails, whatever it is, buy songs on iTunes. I can do anything. And then I also had to learn how to use my computer. So, it has a screen reader as well, but you have to learn different keyboard commands in order to work it. So, first, I had to memorize the keyboard. So I don't know if they still teach keyboarding in junior high.
Do they still teach keyboard?
So do you have to put the little black cover over your keyboard? Okay,
Oh, I
well,
never
yeah.
did that.
Oh, yeah. That's what I had to do, but I couldn't move the black cover and cheat because, I can't see. So I had to memorize the whole keyboard, and that was a challenge, but I did it. And so 8 months after I lost my sight, I was moving back into Berry College again. So I lost my sight in May, and I was back on campus that next January. And it was a huge accomplishment, but it also came with, a lot of new challenges. A lot of my friends, we just didn't really click anymore. I was a different person, and they were doing things I could no longer do. So I lost a lot of friends. I had to kind of build a whole new community of people. I joined a prayer group. I made more friends who were, Christ followers, and who could support me through what I was going through. And what I learned through going back to school and then everything I've done since then is basically that when things like this happen, when life changes unexpectedly, or if you're just going through something that, kind of stinks, it's best to let God take charge and to listen to him for your next steps. So that's kind of what I've aimed to do. And today, I'm kind of not quite there yet with my purpose, but I've seen God work a lot in my life. 4 years ago, I never thought I'd be doing any sort of public speaking because I was super shy, but here I am. So God's led me to speak and share my story, and I also have a blog, so I write to share my story. So that's kind of how I've let God take charge and kind of lead me. So that's kind of the abbreviated version of my story.
Well, absolutely. Thank you for sharing. That's really cool. So what I want to do now is, again, I just want to ask you a couple different questions. With Collier and Hutton, y'all are good to go to the baptism. They're going to go see one of their friends get baptized. But yeah, that's awesome. Um, so I want to read Galatians chapter 5. And again, if you were with us during the summer, if you trekked with us during the summer, we went through the fruit of the spirit, right? Love, joy, peace, patience. You, you know all those. Um, I'm a pastor and I don't even have them memorized, but that's okay. So I want to read these to you, Sara Claudia, which you probably know these, but it says, "But the Holy Spirit." This is Paul writing to Galatia. The Holy Spirit produces this kind of fruit in our lives: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. And Paul goes on to say, "There's no law against these." So a lot of times, us as a church, us as Christians, this is where we kind of go back to this is the fruit, right? So out of that, love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. Sara Claudia, what fruit of the Spirit do you think have been most prominent in your life?
Um, Definitely patience. And I think it's been prominent the first part of my life in a negative way because I'm a very impatient person. But now through this experience, through what I've been through, I'm so patient. And I think it comes from waiting all that time I spent waiting for God to reveal His purpose to me. Because when I want something done, like I want it done right then. That's just how I am. And God doesn't work that way. And I wanted Him to just reveal His plan for me, in 1 second. But I think He likes to reveal it, bit by bit. So He has really worked in me, fostering that patience through kind of making me wait, making me kind of work for His purpose. So, and also just being blind as well. I'm always having to wait on somebody to come pick me up, or wait on somebody to come help me, if I've lost something. So just developing a big sense of purpose over the past 4 years.
Oh, that's awesome. I know when I was teaching through the series, patience was probably the hardest one I had to teach on because I'm not a very patient person. I mean, n- in reality, this culture, and you guys can disagree or agree with me, but we're not very patient people, are we? No. Oh, wow. A resounding no filled the room. But no, especially when life gets hard, right? Like, again, the questions, and speaking for me, the questions come like, why me, God? Like, why are you putting me in this situation? And if you read Romans chapter 8, like, that's the why behind it, for the good of those who God has called his children, right? People who love him, the people who have surrendered to him. So even when life gets hard, even when there is divorce, cancer, death, division, you move schools, you start in a new school, whatever it is, God is not setting us up for failure. I don't believe that's our God. I believe our God is a God who loves us, who cares for us, and he's going to put us in difficult situations. Absolutely, I believe that. But it's ultimately to grow in him, to bear that fruit, of patience, of love, of loving people who are unlovable, of being patient with people who are difficult. So, oh, that's awesome. Um, so let's get to the more of the like Jesus side of the things, if that's a good transition. Um, but how are you different because of what Jesus has done in your life? Say, how are you different 3 years ago, 10 years ago, when you were in junior high? How are you? How are you different from there to now?
Okay. Me and Erica were talking about that too. We were talking about how, when we were in junior high, we had our little gauchos on and we had purses made out of Kool-Aid jammers. And I think,
Oh gosh, I remember those.
yeah, so I think
Oh.
I have better fashion sense. No, but I think the biggest way I'm different is that I have such a stronger relationship with God. And I think that's definitely the biggest thing. But I'm also, I don't know, a lot less worried about what people think of me, a lot less judgmental because, I can't judge people by what they look like. So I listen to what's in their heart and what they say and how they say it. So I'm a lot less focused, I guess, on worldly things and more on, um, the spiritual side of how people talk and act and so. But I think the biggest thing is my relationship with God has made me, I don't know, so much more at peace with everything. It's crazy. I mean, I was always very independent, like I said, headstrong, and a little bit high strung too. Like if things didn't go my way, I would get all in a tiz. But now I just have more patience, and more peace about all sorts of situations because I've gone through something so traumatic and such a big loss that the little things don't seem quite as bad to me anymore.
That's cool. And just thinking through, like, if I were, say, I was in your shoes, like, I would use this. Um, I don't want to use the word situation because I feel like that's a very derogatory, negative
Mhm.
term. But this place of where you are in your life, I would use that as a crutch.
Mhm.
Like I would use that as like use that as for empathy and
Mhm.
for like, hey, look at me, woe is me. Like
Yeah.
that's my mentality. But it's really cool to see that the fruit that is being bared with you walking through this process is boldness. Like
Mhm.
you're going out saying, hey, this is what I'm walking through. This is where God is taking me,
Mhm.
and that's it. Like I'm walking through it. I'm depending on Christ. I'm surrendering to Christ. And I guess I'm just an emotional person and I guess complain, whine, whatever you want to say. But it's really cool to hear that being come from your life.
Thank you. Well, there are definitely days where I just want to lay in bed and have, somebody feel sorry for me. But I found that when you stop moving and you have those days and you let them take you over, I think that's where Satan, that's where he likes to live. And that's where he likes to just expand on those feelings. And you just are stuck in the valley and never get out. But that's where you just have to keep moving.
That's awesome. So I'm gonna go to kind of a lengthy question right here. But I believe there's different types of students sitting in this room right now, and I believe there's three types of people in here. There's people who know truth and have surrendered to truth. Like you pick up your Bible, you've read your Bible, you understand who Jesus is, you've surrendered, you've gone through that salvation experience, you've been baptized, you've been obedient to Him, and you're walking through that obedience and you're walking through surrender. I also believe there's people who know truth but haven't surrendered because I believe there's a difference between knowing the truth and surrendering to the truth. And I believe just being in junior high ministry the past 4 years now that there is a lot of people in churches, and not just junior high ministry, but ministry as a whole, that there's a lot of people in churches, maybe a lot of us today, that we know the Bible. We can spit back the church, the Sunday school answers. We know the stories. But man, we're not surrendered for that. And then I believe there's this third person who's just trying church out for the first time, who don't really know who Jesus is, who doesn't have that relationship with Him, who are coming here with their friends because they talk about it. But what would you say to those three different people, the surrendered, the know the truth, and the checking it out people, about letting Christ work through them?
So let me start by saying, 4 years ago, before all this happened, I was not the perfect Christian. I've been raised on Christian foundation, but I wasn't living it out. So I was probably one of those people who, went to church, but after church, it was just kind of okay. I checked that off the list. So that's kind of where I was. I was kind of in that camp, and so now, God's using me in all these amazing ways. So what I would say is that, God doesn't pick and choose. He doesn't say, "Oh, I'm not going to use I don't want to work through her because she doesn't go to church every time the doors are open." He doesn't pick and choose. He wants to work through all of us if we allow it. So, open your heart to them no matter what camp you're in. Don't think, "Oh, I'm not good enough for God to help me with this situation," because if you allow him to, He will, and through that, that's how you strengthen that relationship with him. And that's what happened with me. I just kind of surrendered to it. I started praying, and it was uncomfortable for me at first because I wasn't used to praying to God like that. But I just stuck with it. I opened up my heart to Him, and He's worked through me in some pretty amazing ways. So
Now, when I had a conversation with Andrew Brooks this morning. We were talking about one of the songs we were going to sing and deciding on that. And I want, which I'm pretty positive you know this, but following Jesus is hard.
oh yeah,
Like the gospel, and me and Andrew were talking about it's simple. Like Jesus found his complete identity in God, surrendered everything that he had for the glory of God, and he did that to the end of to the death of the cross. He took on our punishment so we could be the righteousness of God. But man, everything after that, it's difficult. And like I'm a pastor, guys. It's hard following Jesus in our families, with our friends, in our schools. It is hard to follow Jesus. See, but Jesus has done all the hard work. What me and Andrew were talking about this morning. He's done all the hard work. So the simplicity of surrender, it's a simple statement. Like, yeah, we surrender. We just need to surrender, right? But man, to die to ourselves, it is a hard thing to do. That's why I believe a lot of people in churches don't bear fruit. That they're known as someone who goes to church on Sunday, goes to church on Wednesday. As they check it off the box. So to close, Sara Claudia, speaking to these students, and they're in junior highs, and you've been in junior high before. I know it's been a while. It's been a while for me. It's been a while for some of us adult leaders in the room. But what is a practical way that you can encourage these students? And I wish you could see the crowd that's just looking at you, who've been listening intently to you and just listen to your words and what Christ is speaking through you. But what is a practical way that you could encourage these junior high students to bear fruit?
um, I would say a couple of things. The first one I kind of already touched on is to keep moving. Keep moving in what you're doing. Keep moving in your faith. I know life gets hard. There's obstacles, and sometimes you just want to say, "I'm done. Like this is too hard." Like we were just talking about. It's hard to surrender, and it's not just a one and done thing. You just don't say, "Okay, I surrender to you, God." Like you have to keep moving and keep working at it. So keep moving, and then to turn your plans over to God. I'm a control freak, and it's hard, when things change. I automatically want to say, okay, well, I gotta do this next then. But when things change, sometimes that's because God has a different plan. So turn those plans over to God, and then to acknowledge Him. And when you acknowledge Him, Proverbs says, "In all your ways, acknowledge Him; He will direct your paths." And this doesn't mean just saying, you know, "Okay, God, everything's going great, thank you." This means relying on Him in the good times and in the bad times. And that's what I've learned to do. And He's directed my path and brought me to a place I never thought I'd be, laying in that hospital bed without sight 4 years ago. So
You just keep moving. I mean, that's why I asked for that question: is how are you different from 3 years ago, from 10 years ago when you were in junior high? Because it's all about progressing. And I tell you, and me and Keith, we tell you guys, you just take a step. Move forward. It doesn't matter if your step's a mile down the road, if it's 1 foot in front of you, if it's just a inch in front of you, keep moving forward. So guys, I'm going to challenge you to do something, and I'm going to pray for Sara Claudia. But I'm going to challenge you guys, which I challenge these football players I do a Bible study with. What is one thing that you can do spiritually that would be a step forward? And I'm not asking you to do something radical. Like, I'm going to get in my Bible every single day. I'm going to go to church Thursday night, serve on Sunday, serve multiple services on Sunday, come to church with my entire family. But what is something practical that you can do to move forward? And for some of us, maybe it is just reading the Bible one time this week. And guess what? That's movement. For some, it may be praying these next few days, that's movement, that's fruit. But guys, what can you do to bear fruit? Guys, I want y'all to thank Sara Claudia for coming up and sharing her story. And
Thank y'all.
so I'm gonna do something that might be uncomfortable for some of you. But if y'all just reach y'all's hands out to Sara Claudia right now, I'm gonna pray for her, and we're gonna pray as a Jesus family, and we're just gonna lift you up. Okay? Let's pray. God, we love you. God, we just thank you for the amazing story, the amazing, God, this testimony of you through Sara Claudia's life, God. God, she has done amazing things. She will continue to do amazing things, God, and it's because this fruit that's happening in her life is because she is surrendering, God. God, I just pray that we as a church, we as a Jesus family, that we as a family understand that God is faithful through the good times, through the bad times, through the difficult times, through the mountain highs, God. That, God, you are faithful. Your promise still stands, God. God, that we build our life on your faithfulness, God. That we are faithful to you because you are faithful to us, God. And when we are faithful to you, God, there's fruit from that. God, we can see that in Sara Claudia. God, again, thank you for what you're doing in our church. Thank you for what you're doing in Sara Claudia's life, God. Thank you for the ministry that she's doing, God. God, I just pray that we continue to support her and encourage her, God. God, we love you. We pray these things in Jesus' name.